Warm welcome back to the Information Security Stack together with me, Daniel Gustafsson and Kim Hindart.
Oh, but
Finally back after a long winter break, at least a couple of weeks. That was good. So we are going to continue on this podcast series. And first out today, we are going to talk about what is a local thing in Sweden, but we do believe it has merit in at least Europe and the rest of the European countries. So, long story short, the Swedish government assigned a group who were to sign or write a report rather on the state of IT services and IT hosting for, in this particular case, government authorities, councils, and so on, regarding what's okay and not for using American hyperscalers or international data transfers in general. So the report came out, Kim, and in the report, the statements were a bit contradictory, to say the least, to what the EDPB have stated in their input regarding these questions. And in this particular case, we're gonna focus on the actual data transfer rule that is between the EU and what is defined as a third party country. And in Sweden, our own government authorities have essentially accepted what the EDPB said, the data governance authority in Sweden. And this report now that comes out is essentially contradicting in a lot of cases. So you have read the entire report. It was close to 400 pages, so it's very long. And Kim, let's focus on the data transfer part. What was the contradicted part here?
in this is in essential, they redefined what they mean with transfer, a third country transfer. In the GDPR, there is statements that applies when you do a transfer of personal data to a third country. And this is, of course, debated. What is a transfer? Because unfortunately, they didn't have a hard definition in the GDPR itself what actually constitutes a transfer to a third country. And from the name of it, you might assume that it implies that you actually move data.
Mm.
But the big thing is that if you look at the general concept from the GDPR, is that the EU are concerned when you do processing of personal data outside the legal jurisdiction of the EU. So that's their main concern. Because you and me, we are both citizens of EU. We sit in an EU country. We are direct on the legal authority. Since the regulation is written into law, we can be held legally liable if we break that regulation. So, I mean,
Yes.
the law enforcement in each country in Europe can hold us accountable. So the legal jurisdiction within Europe is that this is law and we need to follow it. If I work in, let's say, for example, China or any other third country, and I sit there and do processing, I'm not bound by European law, and Europe by itself have no jurisdiction, so they can't compel any law enforcement agency or data protection agency to prevent me from breaching GDPR in my processing. So then it comes to the question, what if the data is stored on servers within the EU? But I, as an administrator, sit in China or in the United States or in any other country outside the EU who does not have the EU laws. That's when they say you need to take special safeguards, do risk assessments, and you need to ensure that there are specific clauses and mechanisms to allow for transfers to third countries. The EDPB came out with a direct recommendation they wrote when they had frequently asked questions about the Schrems 2 case. So for those of you who does not really know and familiar with EDPB, the European Data Protection Board is an independent agency. Their role is directly written into the GDPR, so they have assignments specified in the GDPR that gives them the authority to issue guidelines, recommendations, and best practices in related to the interpretation and application of GDPR. So their interpretation is the one that's the main governing body of the GDPR. That's actually written into the law itself.
Mm-hmm.
Although the Swedish report says that the final say on how GDPR is interpreted is, of course, made by the European Court of Justice.
Yes.
And yes, that's true. If you want to challenge EDPB's recommendations, then you have to take them to court and challenge that. So in the end, it's the court who decides that. But you should remember that EDPB, usually the institutions within the EU, they work for the European Commission. It's usually bodies directly assigned by the European Commission. For example, ENISA, the cybersecurity agency, that's an agency working for the European Commission, like any other government agency in the national government. They work for the government.
Yep.
The EDPB is an independent agency. It has the same independent status as the Parliament, as the Commission, as the Council, and as the Court of Justice. They are on an equal basis. So the European Commission can't say towards the EDPB, actually, to be honest. So no, EDPB is a totally independent agency, and this wasn't the case when this was a directive, but when they took the regulation of GDPR, then EDPB became a totally independent agency. It was usually it was named the Article 29 Working Group, but now it's the European Data Protection Board. So they are independent and they are assigned by law the assignment to interpret the application of GDPR. Okay, what does then the EDPB actually say that's in conflict with this? Well, now this report is of course in Swedish, but roughly translated to summarize, they state that it's not a matter of any administration. Where that is done, that's not applicable to transfers. It's only where the data is stored. They are only talking about equipment. And when you move data from one equipment to its sets, so they are concerned only where the equipment is placed.
Yes.
And that constitutes a transfer. And in the FAQs regarding Schrems 2, the EDPB actually says it should be borne in mind that even providing access to data from a third country, for instance, for administrative purposes, also amounts to a transfer. So here it's totally in conflict. Providing access to data from a third country, for instance, for administrative purposes. And in my mind, making administrative access is just as much a part of data processing as where the data is stored by itself. So I think that makes perfect sense. And for instance, as I said, I mean, if I sit in India and work and have access to data, even regardless where that data is stored, I can be compelled by Indian government authorities to bring and present all data I have access to. And if you ever doubt that this has happened, this has been actual cases in the United States where this has happened over and over again.
Yeah.
And according to the report, they say that it's only when data has been actually requested that's the bring a transfer. So that's when you need to consider about it. But yeah, the problem is, for instance, with United States, you can easily get gag orders.
Mm. For
So
sure.
no one would know that the data has actually been transferred.
No.
So just giving access opens up for this.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, when a breach happens, when someone hacks an infrastructure, the chances of you actually catching it and finding it when it happens is slim to none, or at least very low. It's hard to see. So you're going to have to prove the fact that data have been breached in order to present the actual case. So with the EDPB, the way they stated that even though data is located within the EU, and to their point, access should be granted as a data transfer. Well, that is a more wholesome way, at least in our mind, to look at it and view at it, because at least then you will exclude the possibility, or they have a chance to exclude the possibility of a data transfer which we don't know about. Because if I have access, to your point, if I have access to systems, then that access is gold for whoever wants to use it in a bad way.
And
So yeah, this is not. I'm struggling with this phrasing which they have put out.
and to be perfectly clear, the what the GDPR is concerned about is the legal possibility of removing and transferring data.
Mhm.
Not that you're hacked by if the Chinese government actually wants to hack you, yeah, they will probably be able to hack you if they
Yeah,
put enough effort into it. But
exactly.
that's not GDPR concern. The GDPR concern is that they, by any legal means, might have that. So you
Mm,
transfer it. And of course, the most obvious case would be if you store data on servers within China,
mm.
the Chinese government can come and seize the disks.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm. This is the problem, of course. The Chinese government can compel an administrator to hand over data they have
Mm,
administrative access to.
mm,
So that's a big question. Is that a transfer by itself, just by
mm,
granting that access? Or is
mhm,
that a transfer once they actually are compelled? But the problem with this is, of course, we don't know when they are compelled.
mm,
And people say, but hey, that goes for everyone in the entire world. No, not really.
mm.
I
No, there
mean,
are differences.
there are differences because you can look at the track record. The
Mm,
United States
mm,
does this a lot and then gives gag orders, and you don't know it. This is exactly why Schrems 2 fell.
mm,
The problem is that as a Swedish company, we are a Swedish company,
mhm.
but we have data centers globally.
Yeah.
So, of course, Swedish government might come and say, hand over the data you have about US citizens in your United States data centers.
Mm,
We want that. That's a perfectly possible way the Swedish government might press us. And then, if they do that, we
mm,
might be obligated to comply with that as well,
mm,
and by thus breaching a lot of US laws.
mhm,
But the thing is, the Swedish government has a very valid track record of always respecting this.
mm,
So they always go the right way
mm,
and request that from the US law enforcement as well.
mm,
So they always collaborate. So before we get compelled to
mm,
hand over data stored in the United States,
mm,
we, they will have gone through the proper legal channels.
mm.
The same does not apply when the United States does this.
Not at all
And
times,
there's a
anyways.
lot of cases
Mm,
about this in the United States. This is why just GDPR has a bit of a conflict with the rule of law
mm,
between the United States
yeah.
and Europe. So
So
it's yeah,
yeah, go on.
it's not part of the European legal practice
Mm,
not to consider this and take this to account. So that's something you need to know. In theory, of course, a European law enforcement agency might say, City Network, hand over all data you have. We don't care where in the world it's stored.
yep.
Hand it over. And then we will be compelled to do so.
Yeah.
But from historical track records, they have never done this
Mm,
without first actually collaborating
mm,
with the country in question and having a treaty or an agreement in place to do this.
mm,
The same cannot be said the other way around. So
mm.
This is what I think an important factor to consider when it comes to this. But the most astounding part is that they actually say something and give an advice to all government agencies that
Mm.
are in direct opposition to what the EDPB is saying.
Yeah. And quite frankly, I think that is the biggest issue with the report. I mean, there's a good list. There's a lot of good things in there as well. Now we focus on this specific topic because it's been widely discussed for the last year or two, and especially with the Schrems case, it just got actualized even more. So when the European Data Protection Board and in collaboration with the Swedish Data Protection Government Agency are in are unified in their message and their statement, I think it's very daring to go against that and say that, well, our take on it is different, and our the way we propose and the way we write it is in conflict with what they state. Because if I'm a government agency in Sweden, or if I'm a Swedish council or whoever, and I take that report to heart and I say, well, the report states that it was fine, or at least I can treat data transfer as only where the data is stored. And I go ahead and I purchase services and I purchase whatever, and from American hyperscalers, and I think that life is all good. What happens if someone says no, that was not okay, and I end up in court and I lose? The people who wrote the report will not be there to back them up. I can assure you of that. So to give, in my mind, which is literally false hope, unless the government agencies, both from the EU and Sweden in this case, says differently. That's a bold statement, and I would not feel very confident today if I was a CIO or IT manager at the Swedish Council today and say, "Well, I'm going to take the report to heart and use it because you know what." The ambition with the report was to make things clear. That was the ambition. So if you imagine a glass of muddy water, their ambition was to make the water clear. Unfortunately, it became a gooey mess after the report came out,
Yeah.
because since it came out a couple of days ago, and the reason why we're bringing it up, I'm pretty confident that this could happen in any European country, is that when it came out in Sweden, since then, I've seen essentially as many opinions as I've seen people talking about it. And that means the message wasn't clear. And that's a problem.
Yeah. So regardless on how you feel about the case and point in the
Yeah.
report or not, whichever side you end up on, it is perfectly clear that it was not clear enough to unify the opinions in some way.
Yes.
And what I find troubling is that there's a crazy lack of motivation to why they propose this statement
Mm,
in conflict with EDPB and the local data protection authorities
mm,
official statements. Because the report references the documentation, so they had to be full aware of this. So they have at least had to have read these documentations and these statements
mm,
from the different ones. So if you're going to issue something that's in conflict, or at least very obviously appear to be in conflict,
mm,
I don't know the mindset of the reporters. And that's the problem, because they don't take time to explain that, even though they have 400 other pages on other
mm,
stuff. So they could have added a few lines of motivation why they feel they have a different opinion and interpretation of what it's a third country transfer than the EDPB.
mm,
So they could at least have commented on that, I think. So if the
mm,
report is intended to be clear.
mm,
So that should require some motivation, because apart from taking it directly to European Court of Justice and get a court ruling, there is no higher authority on interpreting GDPR than the
mm,
EDPB.
mm,
And if you issue something in conflict with that, you had better have a really good motivation.
mm.
Not just saying, hey, government agencies, it's the court that decides in the end.
No.
Yeah, okay. So we are going to challenge and overrule EDPB guidelines until then? Is that
Mm,
a good idea for all
mhm,
Swedish government agencies?
mm,
And what happens, like you said, when they end up in court then and loses them?
what now? What?
Now what?
Yeah, exactly.
So no, it did not do any help, I would say.
No. So essentially, I mean, once again, I do believe the intention was correct. The intention of the report and the people who wrote the report was absolutely in the right mindset of trying to put a statement out there to assist and help. The problem was, to your point, it was more confusing afterwards than when it came out. And we are in a situation right now, and here's my criticism. We're in a situation right now where we need clearer lines and clear directives on what to do and how to act, because we cannot continue to not knowing what to do. And until we have a new rule in place or new data transfer rule in place with the US, which we can all agree upon, let's call it Schrems 3 or whatever, or at least we don't want a Schrems 3. We don't want the new ruling to fall again. Until that's in place, whatever you put out there will be taken to heart by the people who listen, because this is a problem for tons of government agencies, not only in Sweden but in the entire European Union right now is in this predicament. We need government agencies and we need government authorities to be advising here and helping, and not just put out the statement where we say, to your point, well, here's our opinion, but we won't tell you why we think it is that way. It confuses more than it helps.
Yes, and I sorry to say, but I think it's a glaring omission and total incompetence not to get a statement from the EDPB.
Yeah,
They're there to advise. So
ask
when
them.
you do that, ask them,
Mm,
and please, in the report, provide their statement on the
yeah,
matter at hand,
exactly.
because that's actually what they're there for. So
So yeah, here it is. Anyways, I think we're gonna have to come back to this, and we will come back to this because it was a very large
yeah,
document, and I think to my point, as I said before, I think more countries within the EU will come out with similar reports.
yes,
I just think they will. Sweden is not going to be the only one.
and we will see similar things, and that's why I always say, or advice, if that was not very obvious, is of course, do not follow this report by itself. Always request the opinion of a local data protection authority.
Yes.
And then in the end, they will ask and give the opinion of the EDPB. So
Mm,
they follow each other very well, because the EDPB consists of members from all European data protection authorities.
yes.
So, I mean, yeah, so they know what the official opinion and interpretation are from the EDPB side of things.
Yeah. And
And
also the people working at the EDPB
mm,
are skilled professionals within this field of work.
yeah,
It's not just politicians.
no, that's the only thing they do. So yes, so
Mm.
no,
So
and
they,
yeah, and they are assigned by law to be the government body that interprets GDPR.
yes. And they are here to, and they are there and here to assist and help, and they do, and they have great statements and they have great
Yeah,
FAQs, and I have to give it to the Swedish Data Protection Agency as well, with current previously called Datainspektionen, and nowadays they call something else. Uh, Too long to translate. I'm gonna have to give them some kudos here as well, because in the last year, I believe, at least regarding the GDPR statements, they have come out with good interpretations. They have come out with clear statements of what they think is the right thing to do according to the GDPR law, and they are actually very helpful when you ask them. I think way too few government agencies and private companies do not talk to their data agencies, and in this case, you should. Do
and
not fall on false hope.
and if you write a report that's supposed to unify the opinion of all Swedish government agencies and all public organizations within Sweden,
Mm.
and you have a statement, this is what we consider a transfer, you might just pick up the phone or contact the local data protections agency and say, do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, do you
And
agree or not?
include it.
Mm.
I'm just saying that would be been really nice to have
It
some
would be helpful.
references to what is the actual opinion, especially if you go directly against what they have published.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah. So I mean,
So this report is out there, and even though it is in Swedish, we will still publish it connected to this episode, which you can find on citynetwork.eu/podcast. If you have any questions or if you have an opinion which is EA contradicted to what we believe, because do not take our word as gospel, this is our opinion. We want to hear it. And if you do agree with us, we want to hear that as well, because this, I believe, is a great topic to discuss. So please contact us, send questions. If you want to participate in the episodes, you can do that as well. So until next time, Kim, have a great weekend, everybody.
hubba.